this argument may be the problem. There is conflict that needs to be resolved, but your sibling is not the problem. And even if you are in the wrong, you are not the problem. The problem is that we need to work together as a team to resolve this conflict, resolve the situation.
Welcome to This Whole Life, a podcast for all of us seeking sanity and sanctity, and a place to find joy and meaning through the integration of faith and mental health. I'm Kenna Millay, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm with my husband, Pat Millay, a Catholic speaker, musician, and leader. We invite you to our kitchen table. Okay, not literally, but you're definitely invited into the conversations that we seem to keep having once the kids have scattered off to play and we're left doing the dishes. We're excited to share this podcast for educational purposes. It is not intended as therapy or as a substitute for mental health care. So let's get talking about this whole life.
I'm not gonna stand here with my friends down and
Welcome back to another episode of This Whole Life. It is so good to be with you all, and good to be here with you, my darling husband.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just laughing at the reality of having a few kids here in the home today as we record because of teacher conferences. And I'm like curious about who might be a special guest that might just appear here in our recording space.
We have many great plans for awesome guests in future episodes that are specifically chosen. And you may get a surprise guest today that we did not choose.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It'll be fun.
So coming back after last episode, focusing on family of creation and family of origin, and today really taking another look at that family of creation. So these beautiful families that we are creating and growing with our spouse, the children that we are blessed to raise and get to form. And so, our episode today is going to be focused on sibling conflict and really just helping our children to relate to each other. Before I get ahead of myself, checking in with highs and hards. My darling, how are you? What's going on lately?
I'm doing great.
Are
Thank you for asking. Yeah. Yeah, I think my hard lately has been, we talked about this a little bit last night, but for if you are not aware out there, This Whole Life is a part of a broader endeavor that you and I kind of have taken on, starting a new business for the integration of faith and mental health called the Martin Center for Integration, named after the Martin family, St. Therese of Lisieux, and her parents, Saints Louis and Zélie. And there's lots of really exciting stuff that God is doing with the Martin Center and great opportunities that you and I have to help people of faith integrate their minds and their souls really well. And what that's leading to is great conversations about bringing on additional clinicians and therapists to expand the reach of the clinical side of the MCI, having great conversations with groups and organizations who are wanting to get into a relationship with us to do some training and consulting with them to help their leadership and their members be more mentally and spiritually healthy and whole. And what that is also leading to is a bit of imposter syndrome for this guy, because as a former youth minister, I never really had to do a lot with business proposals and spreadsheets and accounting and things like that. So on one hand, it's really exciting and fun because it's all these new weird muscles that I didn't even know existed in my life that I get to stretch and work out. And on the other hand, it's a little bit tricky and scary to kind of take that step and not exactly know where it's going to go. So that's been difficult, exciting, but difficult and hard for sure. My high was this past week. We had the chance to, our kids had a couple days off school during the week. So you had this great idea to just take some time as a family and do a fun family adventure thing. So we took all of our kids and we drove down to Chicago to go do some of the Chicago city stuff. We went to Shedd Aquarium and Millennium Park and Maggie Daly and all the fun downtown stuff with big buildings and all that. And we got to stay with one of my really good friends from college and his family just outside the city. And it was just so fun. It was definitely tricky at some points and exhausting at some points because road trips with children, as you out there are probably well aware, are never super easy. They're not always a vacation, even if they're a trip. But it was just so fun, so joyful, great family time, great to just relax with our friends and let our kids play with their kids. And we got to do a little Notre Dame game watch with some other friends that lived in the Chicago area and hang out with their kids and just catch up on life. It was a real blast. So thanks for the great idea, babe. Nice job.
Yeah, and it was fun for me to see you in these friendships that actually predate our time together. Like they predate our dating and our marriage, and to see them brought into the present with all of you, having your children there together to play together and seeing them get along and enjoy one another. It was really cool for me, feeling like a bit of an outsider, and being welcomed more into the fold of that friend group that's really dear to you. Yeah,
we've been friends for 20 years, some of them for a little bit longer than that, which is crazy and scary to think about. And when we were like 19, 20 years old, our friendships were full of love and probably a little light on maturity. So it's been really fun to just maintain those friendships, to see how family life has flourished in all of our lives, and just to stay connected and kind of grow together. So it's been great. Yeah.
Love that.
What about you?
Yeah. So I would say the hard for me lately has been, well, definitely we are in that fall, flu, RSV, croup, allergies, who knows what else going on. But it just, with 9 of us here, 7 in school or daycare, like it just seems to never end. And so that's definitely the hard, but I would say within that, the difficult thing for me has been to realize those moments where I have not allowed for the capacity to deal with it. Like it takes so much more effort to be empathetic, to recover from interrupted sleep, from kids who are hacking, coughing. And so the hard has been just that ongoing need for me to be attentive to what others need, and how that's a sacrifice for me. That's a cost. So yeah, maybe my selfishness at times has been really apparent in these last weeks, my frustration, definitely. And so just being confronted with that, and really trying to grow, to mature, and to be more life-giving and self-giving. It's hard work. It is not a low, it is hard work.
It's one of the great challenges of parenting, that it's in the moments that our kids most need our patience and care and physical presence that we feel the least equipped to give them patience and care and physical presence.
Snakes alive.
They have sicknesses that keep them up at night, and they need us there with them all night, but they also need us there the next day when we're exhausted and a little bit maybe quicker trigger on the frustration button,
Yeah, a little crustier. So that is the hard. The high is that, and I saw that you posted this on Instagram, which was really kind of you, to let the whole world know that I turned 40, which I'm super proud of. I think 40 is, people have been asking how's it? 40 is fabulous.
You made it.
I am loving it. I don't know what, I should probably psychoanalyze this later, but I'm feeling more confident and just really excited about life, I guess. And one of the really wonderful things within it, Pat, is that you compiled this. I've been likening it to a quick episode of This Is Your Life, or what, isn't that what that show was called?
I think so.
Where the person would knock at the door and he'd be like, who is that? And it's that student you taught 40 years ago, and they're coming to tell you how they had an impact on your life. So you did kind of a similar thing for me, and with pictures and videos and greetings. And it really just, it regrounded me in what matters in this life and the impact that we have on others. I mean, it's a lot of why we do this podcast, right? That it just felt like a recentering moment and refocusing, and helped me also to realize that God is so good, and He has helped me to live a really meaningful life these first 40 years, a life I'm super grateful for. So yeah, definitely.
I am grateful for your life too. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we get to go out to dinner tomorrow night, which is super exciting. Woo! So yes.
We do practice what we preach. The date nights continue. It's not just for the episode.
an extra special date night. So let's talk about this episode ahead. And this is one that I have mixed feelings about presenting, because I'm worried that in talking about helping our children have healthy lifelong relationships, it's going to sound as if we are the masters, or we are, we're in a professor role. And I'm here to say, like, no. This is because we have tried and we have failed, both with our own siblings, right? Like being aware of the deficits and some of the weaknesses of our own relationships with our siblings. And then also in trying to foster healthy, deep, meaningful relationship in our own children.
This will probably not be the official subtitle on the episode if you're listening to it right now, but the unofficial subtitle of this episode is Things Pat is Terrible At. So keep that in mind.
How about things Pat is growing in? And
positive reframe. Thank you. Yes. Things Pat is actively working on every day of his life. Yes, that's better. Thank you.
So, sometimes what is most difficult for me when it comes to our kids arguing with each other and bickering, aside from the sensory overload, because that is real, and sometimes I just need a break from the sounds of all these humans, but is feeling like it will never change. My own worry that they'll never get along. I mean, I can admit that there's some catastrophic thinking in that. Like I go down the rabbit hole and I project out 40 years and I, see Christmases where children like aren't coming together, around the hearth, to celebrate. And so I got to put a pause on that. But, we tell our kids all the time that the greatest gift we've given them is each other, that we make a lot of sacrifices to have siblings, together. And there's suffering that happens growing up in a big family, because there are a lot of sacrifices and sufferings that all of us experience being in a family. Any family, you can be an only child, and there are sufferings there. Mm-hmm. We are specifically talking about the sibling relationship, of which our children have lots. It's a tangled web that we have woven. And I believe that we've given them each other as a great gift. But man, when they're having their days, I can really question that.
It is a genuine struggle. And it's one of the things that gets on my last nerve first. It's my first last nerve, if that makes any sense at all. It just, the sound of children arguing and fighting grates on my nerves, because I want so much more for them. But I have to catch myself a little bit too, because there's a difference between wanting goodness from our children and for our children versus wanting obedience from our children, right? All too often, I just want my children to do what I tell them, and sometimes that is just to be quiet. When what is actually better for them in certain situations is for them to work out their disagreements and to make noise and to pursue conflict resolution in a healthy way, even if it's not silent. So it's not about a quick fix. It's about teaching them the skills to forgive and to resolve conflict in a healthy way. I'm not trying to solve the conflict on their behalf. I'm not just catching fish for them and giving them food for the rest of their life every single day. I want to teach them how to fish, right? I want to teach them the skills to argue well, to resolve conflict well, to love each other, even in the midst of disagreement and suffering. So it's really about setting up siblings for this lifelong friendship, or at least a good, healthy relationship with one another, helping them navigate how to resolve conflict in the first place. Because, spoiler, human being listening to this podcast, conflict is inevitable, right? We spend so much time and energy, myself included, trying to avoid conflict. And it's really just pushing the ball down the field a little bit. Conflict is always there waiting for us. And it's about stepping into it in healthy and responsible ways and in charitable ways for ourselves and others. So, I mean, in our family, whether it's, whose turn it is to sit in the front row of the van, or if you have older children and it's about who gets to take the car on a Friday night, and all the way down from like, what day will the Smith extended family celebrate Christmas, to, should one of us kids care for our aging parents in the home, or should we enlist the care of other professionals and caretakers in a nursing home? All kinds of conflicts that come up between siblings, young or old. and how we can navigate those conflicts naturally.
Well, and I think, you're bringing up this point of conflict is going to happen because we are individual humans with will, with ideas, with opinions, with needs, with emotions, and sometimes those come crashing into each other. And so, wherever you're at in raising your own children or relationships with your own siblings, we're hopeful that in today's episode, we can offer you perspective that we've received from other people who are very wise,
Right.
and some ideas about how to bring this actively into the way you parent, in the way you relate, because it's here for us. For as long as we're on this earth, this is something that can help to make our lives more harmonious, and to be more virtuous in our relationships.
And there's a couple scripture verses that jump out to me to kind of frame this topic before we get to the practical tips and tools that have started to work for us in navigating our children's arguing and fighting. The first one for me, especially as a parent, is Proverbs 22, verse 6. And it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." And I love that. That's a verse of hope and a verse of really sowing the seeds of grace now when children are young. It doesn't mean that no child will ever struggle when they're older, or that they'll never leave the church or sin or fight with their siblings when they're adults. It doesn't mean that. What it means is the more that we can train a child in the virtues necessary for all of human life when they're young, the more those virtues will become habits, and the more they'll become ingrained, and they'll become second nature even when they're older. So then it kind of begs the question, though, like, what are we training them for? Like, what are we trying to instill in these children when they're young? And in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, St. Paul tells us to do nothing from rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. In our family earlier this week, we just had a big conversation about needs and wants, and about if you, my child, have needs, then it's good and necessary for you to identify those needs to us, you and me, Kenna, to a parent, so that we can help you meet those needs. But if it's not a need, if it's merely a want, if you just want to sit in that seat for dinner, or if you just want to play with that toy that your sibling has, then the good virtue to develop in situations like that is to look for what is good for those around you, to seek the good of the other, the definition of love that Thomas Aquinas gives us. So that's what we're training our kids for when we're approaching these situations of conflict.
And this really does show up a lot in the work that I do with folks, because we as humans are naturally drawn to triangulation. We are naturally drawn to pulling in a third party into a relationship that is meant to be what we call dyadic, so between two people, a dyad. And the reason for that, the understanding of that in systemic theory, is that the more we can spread the anxiety around, and anxiety not in the clinical sense, but just like the tension, right? Like to have a one-on-one conversation is far more intimate than to, sit in a large group, right? So if I draw in the group dynamic, I'm sharing the tension, the intensity with something else. So if we just do straight up math, we could say instead of it being 50-50, we each have to eat part of that tension pie. Well, now it's 33-33-33. And well, isn't that much easier to digest when the pie is so uncomfortable as tension? And so all relationships have tension. I want to maybe push back on a popular notion that tension means something really negative, but it means this pulling, right? Again, we're back to this idea of two people who have will, who have ideas, who have opinions. And so there's an intensity that occurs when, Pat, you and I have a one-on-one conversation, and you're trying to share, put on the fence post what you've got going on, and I'm trying to share mine. Like there's an intensity, and it's a good thing. There's growth and there's intimacy that's born out of that. But we as humans, we can naturally draw in a third. And so when it comes to our children trying to work something out, and their tension and their intensity is showing up in the form of an argument, it can be hard to resist stepping in and being that third, to diffuse what's going on there. And so so, I mean, really what sparked this idea of sharing this on our podcast was listening to another podcast. Pat, I love Kendra Dachi on The Lazy Genius. I haven't listened to everything she's read or spoken, but the few things I have picked up on have really helped me. And as I'm working on clarifying what really matters to me. And she had an episode on navigating siblings who fight, and we'll post this in the show notes so people can listen to it, because she's got a lot of other great points too. But one thing that stood out, and I think you listened to the episode.
I did, yes. Right? It was one of the many times that you have suggested I listen to a podcast episode, and I've been annoyed because I am a sinner and I just want to listen to the things that I want to listen to. And then I listened to it and immediately found value in it and had to admit to you that it was a really great episode. And this particular point was the one that really stuck out to me for sure.
Yeah. So what she said in there was, we want to be coaches and not referees when it comes to our children and to their arguments. And that was like a lightning bolt. And I don't work with children. I don't work with adolescents in my clinical practice, but I work with grownups who are still siblings. And I was like, whoa, I still see to this day, I see, 40-year-old siblings who are being in a triangle, and their conflict is being resolved by their parents, by their 70-year-old parents.
Refereed by.
Thank you. And so I loved this when Kendra introduced this idea, and it really took off in our own parenting, again, imperfectly, but we really started to make this concerted effort, and we saw the fruit of encouraging our children, showing them that we believe in their capacity to resolve their conflict together. Not that we're not going to be there to coach and to encourage them along, but to see them as being on the same team, having the same goal, which is to love and to serve one another in this family and to build up our family culture. Mm-hmm. And it was such a paradigm shift for me. Maybe you can talk a little bit about
because
what it's done for you.
As a sports loving person, man or woman, but as a man in my case, it really stuck out to me as a clear metaphor. Because if you think of the role of a referee in any particular sport, right? There are some really specific situations in different sports I can think of where it's really unclear whose fault the penalty was. Sometimes it's really clear, like roughing the passer, not the quarterback's fault. But in football, if somebody moves before the ball is snapped, was that a false start or was it offsides? Because they all moved, In basketball, when two players run into each other, when one of them's driving the lane, was that an offensive foul by the ball carrier or was it a defensive foul by the defender who was moving his feet, and both teams are pointing the finger at each other, right? They're accusing the other of being the one who broke the rule. And the referee has the right place in those situations to not be a member of either team. The whole point of a referee is that they are outside of the situation so they can adjudicate these penalties and these situations where there's disagreement, right? That is not the stance of a parent, because the key point is that we are on the same team. We are on the same team with each other, you and I, husband and wife and co-parents. We are on the same team with our children. Our family is the team. So in any even minor little micro situation where we are putting ourselves in the stance of a referee, we are kind of breaking the way the family system is supposed to look. We're putting ourselves outside or above our children instead of helping to kind of coach them along like a good coach on a sports team does, to push everyone in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things. I first figure out what I'm doing by deciding what I'm not going to do. So like if I'm not going to be the ref, I focus on, okay, what does a ref do? Okay, I'm going to stay away from that. So it's taken me a while, admittedly, Pat, since we've been working on this, since we listened to the podcast ourselves, the Lazy Genius podcast, to really understand, what are we trying to be as coaches? And absolutely, what you said earlier, that number one point of unifying the team. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are so over the top, or maybe it's just because we have so many players that, everything in our house reads like Team Malay, right?
With our kids, we are a literal baseball team. Yeah. So
in the summertime when we have a summer schedule, it's Team Malay. Like, here's what the chores are. Here's what the, schedule is for getting your schoolwork done and your summer workbooks and chores and, things like that. I mean, we're trying to enculturate our kids into buying into this idea because then we want them to look to us as the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we want them to turn to us because we do know better. I mean, we hold the vision. That's our job as the parents. So they can't yet see that in this room is, possibly your best friend forever, is a great confidant, is, your best cheerleader, is the one who's gonna, see you in the hall on a really hard day in school and, give you a hug or a fist bump or, whatever. Like, they can't see that yet, but we have that vision.
Right.
For them.
Right. And we are the farthest thing from a sports obsessed family, right? So this is not about everything coming back to sports in terms of coaches and referees and teams and things like that. It has nothing to do with that. This is just a really good metaphor, right? I mean, the idea of a team is such a vivid experience for most of us of knowing what it means to put the good of the group ahead of my own convenience or my own comfort, So the role of a coach on a good team is to help everyone buy into that kind of a lifestyle. We are going to sacrifice individually to help make the team great and to accomplish the goals that we've set out. So the coach is the one that holds the vision. The coach is the one that knows where we're going. This is the goal. And I'm going to do everything I can to motivate this whole team to come together as a group to pursue this one vision together.
Well, yeah, because the players in that moment, particularly, or, the siblings in that moment, they may not feel like it's possible. When they're in that fight over that new Lego set, they don't feel like it's possible to be able to compromise and share. Like, their eyes are as big as dinner plates and all they see is like mine, 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 mine. And they want it. They can't see how they really do have what it takes to work together, to compromise. That's the coach's job, to recognize where the skills need to be built to help strengthen those tools of, active listening, of taking deep breaths. We're big on that, like soothing the nervous system. The coach has to teach that. We as parents get to be the ones to instruct our children in that way, because that's not natural for them. That's not instinctual for them. We're the ones who, hold up that vision and motivate them in those moments where they're like, nope, every man for himself. Just do it on your own, guys.
There is an I in team because that's my dump truck. Yeah. And as I learned from my first venture coaching this past fall in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade tackle bar football.
Your foray into the big leagues.
Exactly, right. My first head coaching experience. I'm waiting for the call, Marcus Freeman. You tell me when you need help. I'll be there.
Well, after this week. Okay, no, keep going. Keep going.
I started to kind of get a sense of what I always knew about coaching is that it's this really intricate balance between being a cheerleader kind of for all of your players and helping them to celebrate the things that they're doing great and make sure that they stay motivated, and also being critical in the good way of ways that they can improve. The best coaches out there are the ones that are willing to do whatever it takes within the rules of that sport to get the best out of each individual player so they can get the best out of their team. It's not about being your friend. It's not about telling you what you want to hear all the time. It's not about ignoring the things that you messed up in that last play. It's about pointing them out to you, not to belittle you or to shame you or to embarrass you in front of your teammates, but to help you be better so that we can all be better. And that's one of our key jobs as a parent as well, is to walk that fine line of being a constant cheerleader for our kids and helping them to celebrate the great successes and the joys of the daily, ins and outs of kid life, and also to give them really good feedback about things that they ought to be doing better. Just to help them develop the skills to manage conflict, to learn discipline and virtue, to really help move them in the direction of being holy and capable and empowered adults.
Well, and I think that feedback is so important because they don't know that they're doing it, right? I mean, rarely do our kids intentionally and thoughtfully step into like, I'm going to be an awesome teammate to my brother right now. They just do it. I mean, it's beautiful and they do it. And so then we highlight it, and on our best days, we highlight it and we go, you just did that thing. Like, you know, that thing we were talking about using manners, about not touching the thing that you want, like using words first, body second. Like, you just did that. And they kind of look at us like, real, I did. And so we get to celebrate that with them. And also same with correction. Like, they're just going about doing their thing and they don't even know that once again, they have, you know, spoken to the sibling in that way that we've been asking them to correct themselves, what have you. We have to highlight that for them too. And that's the job of the coach, to be looking out for that, raising that up to their awareness.
Right, right.
You know, our role as parents, we get to hold that long view in mind, right? Our kids, developmentally, they are living in the moment in a very extreme way. I wish I had a little bit of that in me still. But we remember just 2 weeks ago when they weren't able to negotiate the conflict as well. Or, you know, I think about one of our kids who we've really worked on taking the breaths, slowing down when he's starting to engage in conflict, and to get him to really think about what he wants to do next. And I can see the progress he's made, you know, over the last couple weeks, certainly months, definitely the last year.
Yeah.
And as the coach, as the parent, like, I hold that up for him. And I say, bud, you have come such a long way. Like, here's how I've seen you improve, you know, and really articulate that for them. That's the privilege of being the parent, because they don't see that. They don't remember that when they've got their eyes on the dump truck.
And the more that we can get out of that stance of refereeing, the more we can reinforce the beautiful truth that we are on the same team together.
Yeah. And to go back to Kendra's, to draw in the Lazy Genius episode, she had this great phrase, this $1 million phrase. She said, she goes to her children when she hears that things are starting to escalate. You know the sound, like when voices, when the tone, the volume, it's all changing. And
I can act out the sound for you if you want, but I won't because.
And she's like, you know when it's coming. And she, you know, proactively goes in and says, do you guys need my help? And I love that statement because it really speaks to the confidence we have in our children to be able to do this, not perfectly, not without tears. Sometimes, unfortunately, we still have to deal with those, but to see that there is greater value in you guys working this through and coming out united than in just figuring out who gets to play with the blocks, figuring out who gets a turn, you know, next with the Wii remote. And so that, do you guys need my help, really speaks to that sense of autonomy and agency that we want to instill in our children. We don't want them to be dependent on us to manage their relationships with each other, because this is, you know, the school of the family. We are preparing them for how they can relate with others outside in the world. Some days I'm worried about that, but other days I do have hope. So that do you guys need my help has been huge for us in our house, and we're trying to use that more.
And what I love about that is that it identifies correctly the nature of the problem. So I think, you know, in less argumentative circumstances, a parent might use that phrase, do you guys need my help, for just a project that is complicated. So if two little toddlers are painting, or if they're working on sculpture or something like that, they may physically need help. So nobody's arguing, but it's good and loving for a parent to step in and say, do you guys need my help with this problem? The sculpture and your fine motor skills as a 3-year-old are the problem. Your relationship or this other person is not the problem, right? If an older kid is having trouble with a research project, you know, it's good and loving for a parent to step in and say, do you guys need my help finding the right sources and identifying, you know, what the important information is versus the kind of unnecessary, superfluous information. So when siblings are arguing and fighting, it's really helpful to use a phrase like that to remind them your sibling is not the problem. This argument may be the problem. There is conflict that needs to be resolved, but your sibling is not the problem. And even if you are in the wrong, you are not the problem. The problem is that we need to work together as a team to resolve this conflict, resolve the situation.
Yeah. The problem is there's one set of blocks and two of you.
Correct.
And
yes.
you haven't figured out how to share with that yet. Yeah. And I think part of what really struck me about this episode was just this honest realization on my part that I often resort to refereeing over coaching because it's much more, in the moment, it definitely feels more expedient. And I want the tension to stop. Like I want the argument to stop. And it's easier to walk in the room and say, Johnny, I saw your sister playing with that, and now you need to give it back to her. And to dismiss his side of the story, it's much harder it takes more time, it takes more energy to kneel down next to them and to call them together and to stand with them, to support them in sorting out a resolution and being that container that holds this together and says, no, you guys can do this. And, reminding them maybe of some of their self-soothing skills, to take a deep breath. There's a certain level of affect tolerance, right? So being able to endure difficult, upset feelings. Mm-hmm. There's a certain level of affect tolerance that's required of me in this scenario. And I'm not always feeling generous in giving that. And when it helps when I hold in mind the greater value of I want them to have lifelong relationship. They do not need to be besties. That is not what I'm going for here. But I want them to know how to speak respectfully to each other, how to communicate, with one another, how to negotiate and compromise. So it only gets more true that I want that as they get older. And so it's going to require of me as their parent to coach them in this, to bring them up in it. They need that scaffolding to get to the goal. I can't expect them to turn 18 and leave the home and just magically arrive at this place of relationship.
Because really what we're doing is we're helping them in this beautiful and intentional process of self-discovery, right? It is certainly ineffective in a teaching circumstance, like in a school or in a family, to just tell people what they ought to be doing. That does not lead to lifelong instilling of values and virtues and even memorization as a child when you're learning in school. It's so much more effective and just related to the truth to discover it for ourselves. There's that thrill of self-discovery of finding out, oh my gosh, it works. If I don't scream at my brother the moment he takes that toy that I was playing with, it actually works out better and he's more willing to give it back to me, So leading them down that road of self-discovery, not imposing the right answer upon them, but leading them to it and giving them the opportunity to find it kind of naturally.
Well, and what you're saying though, Pat, again, everything screams the affect tolerance to me, because as I hear you saying that, I'm like, but that takes time and I don't feel like I have time. Like it demands a patience on my part and an unfolding of that process of letting the relationship develop, letting each individual child develop the skills and the capacity they need to be able to do this thing that we're hoping they'll do. Mm-hmm. And so that patience can be hard to come by. I'll speak for myself when I say that, like that patience can be hard to come by. And also, again, if the greater good, if the greater value is teaching my child to fish instead of handing them a fish, I must abide with them. I must endure the process of watching them take a winding, circuitous path when I'm like, I can see the straight line, like that would get you there faster. But to prescribe their actions would rob them of the ability to grow and to learn virtue and to experience charity and to strengthen in that. And so, as parents, asking ourselves, like, what do I need to do for me so that I can let that natural, as you said, Pat, that natural process unfold?
Right.
How can I self-soothe myself and help myself to keep in mind the greater good that I'm going for, that's not going to be actualized today, but that I'm putting bricks on the path, on the way to that lifelong connection and relationship and helping my kids develop as humans.
Right. Because like you said, refereeing is easier. Coaching and leading them toward healthy conflict resolution is better. It's so much harder, but it's better because it's going to help develop children into adults that are able to use these skills in every facet of their life with their own grown siblings, at the workplace, at the church ministry that they volunteer with. There will always be conflict wherever they go. So the more that we can coach them into the ways of resolving conflict that have an understanding of respecting their own identity and value and the value of the other, man, if we can do that, that's a huge accomplishment as parents, I think.
So a real life example recently where I noticed that one of our kids was really struggling in his relationship with his sister, and needed my support. So I'm trying to remember the scene exactly, but I think it was at night when like the 5 little ones were already in bed. You and I were working on something in the dining room, and we saw our son just poking the bear. I mean, just trying to get his sister's attention in all the wrong ways. I mean, literally, I think like bouncing around a ball and it would hit her in the head. She was trying to read a book on the couch and, and asking her all these questions about what she was reading or what had happened at school that day or what they were going to do the next day. And I was listening to it and realized like, oh, he wants to hang out with her. And like, it was so sweet. And also like, oh, he like doesn't know how to like say that. And so by the time I got to him, he was like gloomily laying on the couch across from her. And I said, bud, it sounds like you want to hang out with her. And of course she's in earshot. She can hear, all of this, but I was trying to be private, but she can hear it all. And he was like, yeah, but she won't want to hang out with me. I just know she won't. She's reading her book. And it's true. This child really loves her books. So I could see where he felt like, Mom, why would I ask the girl out if I'm going to get shot down? Like, I know that there's like no chance. And I said, well, that's true. I said, it's quite possible that she wants to keep reading her book. Or you could see if there's something else that she'd want to do that you might want to join her in. And I think his response was something like, well, what would we do? And I said, well, I don't know, ask her. So this is that coaching. This is that like working it through with him. He's seeing a lot of roadblocks. I'm seeing opportunities, right? We got to sidestep, got to be creative, got to jump over some things. But like I'm seeing this and he can't because he's in the weight of his big upset feelings in that moment. And so what ended up happening is, I worked with them, kind of coached him, stayed on maybe his side of the ball a bit and helped him to be able to make some suggestions to her. They were totally able to find an activity. It doesn't always end this way, guys, with this happily ever after. But on that night, like I was like, yeah, like this was a great opportunity for us to be able to help him have one more experience of like, okay, that's how I socialize. Like that's how I communicate about what I'm feeling instead of with my feelings, right. To hopefully get a need met, which is oftentimes what's going on. Those needs are clashing when siblings are in conflict. So I think that's a concrete example that stands out to me where we've been applying this coaching idea with our kids. I mean, anything for you? You're with the littles a lot more than me these days, too, during the school day. So,
well, what I love about that is what you didn't do in that situation is just holler into the other room, hey, your sister's reading, leave her alone, knock it off, you know?
Or the other way, like manage it, right? Triangle. Right. And I mean, I think that's probably where I've been in the past is like to say to her, can't you see your brother? Spend some time with your brother for crying out loud. Your dad and I are trying to get some work done over here, you know? And so just come on in and just wrench, myself in there and take control over it. So I might be growing too.
Look at you. Hey, apparently we have skills that need development too. Is that part of the puzzle here? Yeah.
I guess coaches get better with
So well. Just this morning, I was home with our 4 younger kids, right? So 5 3-year-old twins and a 2-year-old. And I heard some massive battle emerge in the living room about who knows what. And it turns out, listener out there, you'll be shocked to know that there was a 3-way battle between the twins and their older brother about a little 2-inch dumb plastic spider left over from Halloween, which of course...
Not
since
dumb.
One of them had it,
such a treasure.
It meant that the other 2 wanted it, and it was
its value
a serious
just went up
problem. Exactly. It is a bit of supply and demand, right? Like it just scarcity is a real motivator in our household. So I was tempted, as I often am, to come in and just do the referee thing, right? Okay, who had it first? All right, you had it first. But who does it technically belong to? Oh, it belongs to him. So how do I figure that out? If you had it first, but it's his, then who gets it now? But I just took a step back and I didn't do that. And I used the magic words, hey, do you guys need my help? Right? I'm on your team. We're on the same side and we're going to solve this problem together. And we did end up doing a little bit of negotiating in terms of who's going to get a turn with the little stupid plastic spider. And it was really funny actually, because I told one of our twins who was going to get the first turn. I said, all right, now your brother gets his turn in 5 minutes. And she like very threateningly said to me, no, 6 minutes. I was like,
And he does know math, so he was like, sweet.
whatever,
I bet.
fine. 6 minutes. That's great. Yeah, you drive a hard bargain, kid. I can't out negotiate you. That's fine. But it was great. And it ended up that they were fine. And once the initial argument was passed and they figured out some kind of a resolution, they were able to move forward together. And what helped them is because they knew they were on the same team and there was a plan, they weren't obsessing over that spider for the entire 6 minutes that they didn't have it, right? So the kids that weren't involved in the first turn, I was trying to ask them, like, what do you want to do in the meantime? Do you want to read a book? Do you want to play downstairs? Do you want to do something different just to get your mind off it, just so you're not obsessing or perseverating, you would say, as a clinician over this one thing for the entire 6 minutes.
Yeah,
and
because
creating
the pot never boils. So
Right, exactly. Creating a whole different argument again after 6 minutes, right? But it was a really great opportunity to just in one small way try to teach some of the very practical skills that our kids will need to do that exact argument a million different ways for the rest of their lives in things that are way more consequential than plastic spiders from Halloween, you know?
Yeah. And again, back to that, like what a gift we could have given them. That's a lot harder to figure out, when they're out in the world and away from our daily influence.
Yeah.
So this coaching stance, this perspective of holding in mind what is the greatest goal I have when it comes to my children and their relationship with each other, and maybe that can be the gas in the tank to power us through when we need that patience. We need that margin of affect tolerance. This is not an easy job, guys.
Yeah. And maybe as we bookend it and look toward wrapping up here, it's probably helpful and appropriate to revisit how much of a struggle this is for me at times. I can't think of any more difficult moment than like 4:15 in the afternoon where I'm trying to finish cooking dinner and the children are fighting in the living room and I hear it escalating, like you mentioned. And it is so much easier. And if you're listening and you have children, you know this. It's so much easier to just stand at the stove and just go, knock it off! Don't make me come in there! So much easier. And guess how many times that works out of 100? 0 times out of 100 do they actually stop what they're doing and peacefully, joyfully resolve the conflict on their own. It's so much easier to do it that way, but it's so much better to just pause what I'm doing, take maybe literally 30 seconds, go out to the living room, get down on their level, and ask them, how can I help? Do you guys need my help? If you're in the South, do y'all need my help? If you're in Pennsylvania, do yins guys need my help? I don't even know what you say out there, but do you guys need my help? Just coach them down the path of resolution.
Yeah. So let's talk about our challenge by choice this episode. So you maybe saw this coming, but it's going to be to create a habit with that $1 million phrase, do you guys need my help? So for me, I regularly need a Post-it note, a good old fashioned physical reminder to interrupt the system that is Kenna's head and Kenna's habits and the way she's always used to doing it, which is yelling from the other room, which is ill-advised. And so I need something to jolt me back into like, oh yeah, I'm trying to do that thing where I'm more of a coach than a referee. So putting that phrase, do you guys need my help, on a Post-it, on a piece of paper, on the whiteboard, and sticking it in that spot, right? So Pat, for you, it's the stove when you're making dinner, and it's that witching hour for our family. So for you out there, where is that spot? Where is that place where you're going to need that reminder to challenge yourself to do something different?
Yeah, so we're looking forward to hearing from you out there about how that goes for you. How in the next couple of weeks can you step into that stance of coaching your children in moments of conflict and argument instead of refereeing, try to find out who is right and wrong, punish the offender, and let the other one go play outside or whatever. How can we be even more attentive to our role as parents, as coaching, leading, and guiding our children in the path of self-discovery toward conflict resolution? We can't wait to hear how it goes from you. So if you would, seriously, if you would go to thiswholelifepodcast.com, there's a little form on there you can fill out. Just shoot us a little story about how that goes for you. How does that phrase work for you? Is there a variation of it that you find works better with your kids? Friends, let's wrap up in prayer as we finish this episode. Let's pray for our kids, for our spouse, for our own ability to coach and to lead well in our families, especially when things get really tricky and messy in human disagreement. Let's pray. Lord God, we love you, and we put ourselves in your hands today, like every day. Lord, we know that you created us good, and you have created us for good. And you also know, Lord, that in our fallen state, we fall into disagreement and argument and conflict and fighting, that there are so many things that come naturally to us, even as children, that lead us into conflict and difficulty with one another. Especially those in our families, our siblings, and our parents that we grow up with. So, Lord, as those of us who are parents ourselves and are seeking to lead our children toward you, we ask for the grace of being on the same team with them, of standing with them and walking toward you and helping them to discover the tools that you've given them, the virtues that you've given them to seek peace and wholeness in their relationships, especially with their family. Lord, help us in moments that are difficult for us to lean on you and to endure the difficult emotions and stresses that come our way. And we ask for your healing in all of our relationships, especially in our families. And we ask all this, Lord, in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Excellent, excellent. Well, check us out, thiswholelifepodcast.com. You can also please, if you would, rate and review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio or any of the podcast apps that you use to listen to This Whole Life. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook at This Whole Life Podcast and on Twitter at This Whole Life. God bless you, friends. Good luck out there coaching your families toward holiness, and we will see you next time.
You're not alone.
This Whole Life is a production of the Martin Center for Integration. Visit us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com.
You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone.
It was also from a woman from another country with this awesome accent eating a box of Cheez-Its. And so it was just like amazing.